Hey, welcome to Crossroads Online. My name is Roy Cervantes, and I serve as the worship pastor here at Crossroads Church. We believe in bringing a real God to real people through community, and that the church is more than just a building, but a group of people that are walking together and trusting Jesus every step of the way. Because of that, we're so glad that you decided to tap into our online resources, but this should in no way be a substitution from your involvement in the local church. I believe that God can speak directly to you and impact your life through this online message, but every single time he says, go and be a part of my church. There are a lot of things going on in the life of our church. Take a look around, and we hope that you enjoy this message.
Something that I think is just incredibly important when you feel, the whole series is about when you feel like you're down, like it's the bottom, like you're already down, and the reason you're at the bottom of the ninth is because you didn't win the game yet, right? And so, you ever had that feeling where you feel like something in your life should have already happened and it hasn't happened yet, and you start to just kind of get frustrated with God. You're like, God, this should have happened already. My son should, we've been dealing with this with my son for a long time, and he should be back on the track now, right? You ever had that? Or maybe in your finances, you say, I've been trying to get out of debt, and it's like every time we do it, it's like 3 steps forward and then 5 steps backwards. The car breaks down or something happens, and sometimes we feel like we're just the odds are stacked against us. And what do you do in those moments? And I want to talk this morning about the importance of doing one specific thing when the odds are stacked against you that I think can change the course, if nothing else, mentally of where you're going. There's a study that was done several years ago with a bunch of rats. And I don't know if you know this, but rats are really good swimmers. Rats can just swim and swim and swim for hours. And so they took a bunch of rats and they threw them into a pool, and they just wanted to see how long can rats swim. And rats can swim for a long time, some of them for days, right? So then they took those rats out, gave them a little rest, and then they took half of the rats, and they took the rats and they held the rats and squeezed them while the rats fought them, trying to get free, right? And they held these rats until the rats couldn't resist anymore and just got exhausted and just gave up, right? So they just forced them into submission. Well, then they took all the rats, they threw them back in. This was back when inhumanity in cruelty to animals was okay, right? They threw them in the pool, and the rats that had been forced to surrender, give up hope, they drowned within just a very short time of being thrown into the water. And normally rats are really good swimmers. Now the rest of the rats, they kept swimming around and kept swimming around and kept swimming around, but the other ones, they literally just gave up, sunk to the bottom, and drowned. And what they learned in this is that helplessness in many ways is something we learn. And we learned helplessness is what it's actually called, that based on our past experiences, we remember how it went down. And if it was a bad past experience, we're very prone to give up hope in our present situation if we have a memory of it going down negatively. But the converse of that, if it went positively, you're just like, well, those rats that keep swimming, well, somebody's going to come and pull me out of here eventually, right? But when you've been in a situation where you felt like you got forced, you got crushed or you got pushed down or beaten, it's so easy to give up hope. And hope is one of those things that we can't afford to give up in hard times. So I'm going to talk about that this morning. But I was going to tell a little bit of a story of about something that I remembered recently, and I'd completely forgotten about it. So when my wife and I had just gotten married, and we moved down to Peru as missionaries. And when we got down there, I was I was all full of faith, we're going to be missionaries, right? And one of my prayers was, I heard it was really hard to find good housing in this town we were going to live in, Cusco, Peru. They said it's just really hard to find good houses here. So we prayed, and I just had this faith within me. You ever had that where you're just man, I just know God's going to come through on this. I'm just so confident. And I had this tremendous faith that God was going to come through. And so when we got to Peru, as soon as we got there, the same day, I'm let's start looking for houses because I know God's got the house just for us and set up. And so we started looking around for houses. The first house we went to was 2 stories, and the second story was 5 foot high. I'm who the flip built this thing? And now, to be honest, most of the people around there are 4'6", right? So it works well for them. But I'm 6 foot, and I'm I can't even stand up in my own bedroom. It's let's go to bed, honey. So that was just a total discouragement. I'm well, that house isn't going to work. Then we went to this other house that had 3 stories. It's the weirdest thing. The kitchen was on the 3rd floor, but the oven was on the 2nd floor. I'm who, forward planning? Anybody, hire an architect, right? It was so weird. we came on all these houses that had all these weird things about them. And I'm like, so I'm starting to get irritated because I'm like, God, dude, like, we had an agreement, you know, and I was full of faith and stuff. Like, I knew you were going to come through, and nothing. And so day after day, days pass, and we still haven't found a place to live, and I'm starting to get discouraged. And I'm kind of getting mad at God. You ever had that where you're just like, God, like, you know, I've been faithful, and I've been doing what I'm supposed to do, and like, I thought you were going to do some sort of a miracle here. Well, the miracle hadn't happened, and so Emily, she's making dinner one night, and she's like, hey, I need you to go down to the market. It was an open-air market like you'd find in Latin America, and get some avocados. And so I went down, and man, out Peru has some great avocados. Random avocado story. I went to one time where there was this lady that I would always buy avocados from in Peru, and there were one sol, which is like 33 cents, right? Big avocados. And one day I showed up, and she said, they're 2 soles. And I was like, why did the price double overnight? And she's like, because all you Americans are taking our avocados for shampoo. Anyways, that had nothing to do with the story, but I just remembered it. So I was like, I don't use avocados in my shampoo. But anyway, so I'm getting these avocados, and I walk out of the market, and I'm so ticked, right? You ever been just like, God, you let me down, and I'm walking around just pouting. I'm walking down the street, and I feel like God says, hey, walk a little further down the street. And I'm like, we already went to this neighborhood, you know, like we went to that neighborhood earlier. That was where the house with the 5-foot ceiling was. And so we had looked at every available house in the newspaper in this area. We looked online. There was nothing in this area that we could find. It was a perfect area, but there was nothing there. And I'm walking down the street. I'm like, holding avocados. And this old guy goes, hey, gringo. I was like, hey, ¿qué pasa? And he's like, are you looking for a house? I was like, yes. He's like, I have an apartment available. It's like, well, where is it? He's like, it's right here. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably got a 5-foot ceiling or something, or like a toilet in the bedroom. Like, next. And I'm like, so it's like, okay, well, let me see it. And he's like, so he takes me up to this house, and it's this 2nd-story house, and it's got these beautiful tiles. It's got two beautiful bedrooms. It's got this amazing front with all glass looking out over the valley of the city of Cusco. I'm like, whoa, clearly we cannot afford this house. Because our budget was $500, which is a lot for Peru. And I said, how much for this? And he's like, $280. I was like, what? So I'm thinking, okay, what's the catch? Like, is there no plumbing? And I'm looking around, like, trying to figure out what's the house is epic, right? And then he takes me up to this upper patio, and it's this beautiful patio overlooking out, and you can put a grill there. It's covered. It's amazing. And I'm like, so at that moment, I'm like, Jesus loves me, right? You ever had that where you're like, one day it's like 1 minute, like literally 1 minute. It's like, God, and then it's like his touch of his favor, and you're like, yeah. So I run home, I tell Emily, and we end up moving into this amazing house. It's below the budget we had calculated. And here's the thing. I had forgotten about that. I just forgot about it. Life happened, right? And well, a few months ago, I was kind of in that mood again where I kind of pouting about some stuff that I wanted God to do. I was like, God, this should have happened by now. You know, I had a plan, and come on, man, I had a plan. And if you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So what I do when I get frustrated and irritated, you know, some people like hit the bottle, or some people go work out. I clean. I just go start throwing junk out. So I'm like, my wife, she starts freaking out. She's like, there's nothing left to throw out. Please, please. So I'm just starting to throw stuff out, like, give it to Goodwill, give it to Goodwill. And I come across this little notebook. And somehow back in the day, I had the wherewithal to start writing everything that happened on a day-to-day basis when we moved to Peru. And I just happened to pop open to this day, February 18th. And I remembered this story of God providing that house. And you know what's funny about it, too? It felt like an eternity, right? It was the 3rd day we were in Peru. Anyway, the whole time, I'm like, God, you're letting me down. It's like 3 days later, we got a house. But all of a sudden, and it kind of made me go, I'm such an idiot. Like, why did I forget? I forget, right? And you know, here's the thing. We're all prone to forget the good stuff God did in the past. It's just so easy to forget that. And we get discouraged and we get frustrated. And here's what I know. Like, every one of us in this room, every one of you, you've got something that you've been kind of trusting, you've been really trusting God for, and maybe it's not happening. Maybe you're like the finance thing. You're saying, man, we should not still be at this place in our finances, but here we are, and it's so frustrating. Or maybe you're saying, I should have had a job by now. Why have I not had a job open up for me? I've been trying and trying, and like, God, what's the deal? And or maybe in your relationship, your marriage, you're saying, man, I'm so discouraged. It was not supposed to be like this, and God, I've been praying that it would get better, and praying that it would get better, and praying that it would get better, and it's not, and this marriage is still so hard, and it's so frustrating, and we've all got that. But here's the other thing we all have. You have a moment, I'm certain of it. Every one of you have a moment in your life that you can look back and you say, man, I know God came through for me on that one. I know he protected my life. I should have been dead. I know he delivered me in that situation. I know he provided finances for me that there was no way that could have happened other than him just miraculously providing. We've all got a story like that, but we are so prone to forgetting that stuff. When things get hard, when you're down, the end of the bottom of the ninth, you're looking down and you're saying, oh, it's not looking good, right? And we forget that God did some amazing things in the past, and God never changes. So you know what that means? He'll do it again, just like that song says. I was doing some research. I was trying to figure out, why do we forget stuff? Because our brains are super powerful, right? Some people say, you never forget anything. And I was like, well, why do we forget? I forget stuff all the time. And I found this lady named Elizabeth Loftus, and she does all this study on memory. And she said there's 3 reasons we forget stuff, right? So the first one is what's called an encoding failure. An encoding failure is where details of what happened in the past, they never lock into your long-term memory because you didn't focus on the details. So they do this test, and y'all got your thinking caps on. You ready for this? I've got a challenge for you. They do this one test to prove this, that the details, we don't pay attention to details a lot of times, and we don't remember things we need to remember. So let me ask you this. Which one of these pennies is the current penny that you have in your pocket or at home? Which one of these pennies is the right, this is the U.S. penny that we use? I'll give you a couple seconds to look at it. It's A. You know, only about 50% of people get that right. And here's why, because of encoding failure. You don't really need to know the details of what's on the penny's face, so you don't memorize it. You just go, that's a copper thing, and that's a penny, right? And so what happens a lot of times in our memories is we just kind of remember this blob of a thing, and we don't remember the details of what happened. So maybe God did something amazing, and all you remember is, man, God bailed me out there, but you don't remember what had to stack up for him to do that amazing thing, and so we end up forgetting because we didn't get the details. So the encoding never happens in the long-term memory. Another reason we forget is what's called decay theory. This theory is basically that, if you don't constantly remind yourself of stuff, it just falls off in the memory because there's just so much stuff coming and going. Now, there's a problem with this. Some people are like, I don't agree with this theory because, have you ever had, sometimes we just have random memories pop up. You're like, where did that come from, right? So some people say, no, that's not the case. You always remember everything. It just takes the right trigger, right? And then the third one is this one. It's called interference theory. And this one's really interesting because basically what this theory says is your mind is constantly being bombarded with so much information that new memories always replace old memories unless you constantly remember the old memories. So new information is always competing for old information in your brain. And so what ends up happening is something good may have happened, but if you're not constantly reminding yourself of that, the circumstances around you, whatever you're facing, the struggles you're facing, the lack of hope you're feeling is going to conflict with your memories of what God did in the past. And it reminded me of a story of a guy named John the Baptist. And we all know John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist was sent ahead of Jesus to proclaim that Jesus was on his way. John the Baptist is out there in the desert. He's declaring, hey, get ready. Jesus is coming and everything's going to change. And then all of a sudden, one day, Jesus shows up. And John realizes it instantly. He's like, behold, there's the Lamb of God that's going to take care of everything. He's going to take away all the sins of the world. Jesus walks down. He's like, hey, John, baptize me. And John's like, whoa, hold up. No. You're supposed to baptize me. And Jesus says, no, you need to baptize me to make this thing the way it's supposed to go. So John dunks Jesus in the water. And here's what happens. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. And at that moment, heaven was open. It's like the classic moment, right? Heaven was open, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. It literally was like a break in the clouds. The sun comes down, this dove shows up, and then on top of it all, a voice from heaven said, this is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. I mean, can you imagine hearing a voice from heaven like that? That's what we all pray for, right? Lord, I just need a voice from heaven, right? John got it. He sees this. They're like his voice from heaven. Can you imagine what it would be like to have experienced that? Just like, wow, this is the moment I was put on earth for. This moment, like it's here. Jesus is here, right? Well, here's what happens. A few years later, Jesus is out doing his ministry. John gets thrown in jail unjustly. He gets put in prison. He had a freak out moment. You ever had a freak out moment? Don't lie. You all have. We have these freak out moments. And now here's what happens. Now John heard while he was in prison. So, you have this glorious moment. And then just shortly after he's in prison, you're like, what's going on? So can you imagine if I'm John, I saw the light come down, the dove, the voice. I'm thinking, Jesus is going to come in here in serious fashion and show some people what's up. Like he's going to come and deliver me, kick in the door, be like, right? Nothing's happening though. And John's thinking, maybe it was after, maybe he had just gotten a beating or something. And he calls his disciples in and he says, hey, go ask Jesus, are you the one who's to come? Are we supposed to look for another? Because this isn't working out like I thought. I had some expectations of what you were going to do. And I'm in prison here and my back's getting a little sore because they keep beating me. And I'm getting tired of this. And so, what's the deal? So the disciples are like, hey, Jesus. They show up and then Jesus answered them. He said, listen to me. Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind are getting their sight back. The lame are walking. Lepers are cleansed. That doesn't happen, y'all. Leprosy is like a terminal thing, right? And the deaf hear. And the dead are raised. And the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who's not offended by me. He didn't even give them the answer. He said, listen to me. Basically what I think he was saying to them is this. Guys, look at the miracles. Look at the miracles. Look at the miracles. And don't get offended. Don't get upset. Don't lose hope when I don't play things out like you thought they'd play out. When you don't end up married when you thought you were going to be married. When you don't end up out of debt when you thought you'd be out of debt. When the marriage is not where you thought it would be and you're struggling and you're saying, I don't know if I can hold on any longer. Don't get offended. What you need to do is look at the miracles. Because here's what we're all prone to do. I've heard it described this way. We forget in the darkness what we saw in the light. John saw this light open up over heaven and Jesus, amazing things happened. But then when it got a little dark, he forgot. And man, how many times has that happened to us? We know God delivered us. We know he set us up for where we are. But then it gets a little hard. And you start going, this isn't the way I thought it was going to go down. And then all of a sudden we start to doubt in the darkness what we saw in the light. And I think God knows we're prone to this. So like when the children of Israel, when they were entering into the promised land, the first generation of them, they were delivered. And then they didn't believe God. So they're wandering in the desert for 40 years waiting for all the old people to die off, right? And they had seen a miracle, but they had doubted God's ability to get them into the promised land. So one of the miracles they saw was the parting of the Red Sea, right? That's the big one, right? But then there was another miracle that happened when the next generation was going into the promised land. The river of Jordan, to get into the promised land, the river Jordan was flooded, and they had to cross the Jordan. Now it was completely flooded. So God says, here, I'm going to do the same thing I did for your parents, but I'm going to do it for you so that you can see my power, right? Because you're going in here and you're going to have my power. So what's going to happen is I'm going to stop the flow of the Jordan, and you're going to walk through the river, and while you're walking through it, I need you to do something. So this is the orders he gave to Joshua, and Joshua gave it to his men. He says, Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel. He said, guys, we're about to cross over, right? He'd appointed them, and a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, go before the ark of the covenant, your God, into the midst of the Jordan. So God's going to stop the river flow. I want you to walk into what was the river, and when you're in there, take up a stone upon your shoulders. He's not like, don't pick up a little rock. He's like, put something on your shoulder. I want you to take a big rock that was previously covered by a flooding river. I want you to put it on your shoulder, and I want you to take it out, and I want you to put it on the side of the river according to the number of tribes of the people of Israel. That way, it will be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, hey, what do those stones mean that are beside the side of the river? You tell them, hey, the waters of the Jordan, God did a miracle. He cut off the Jordan from flowing in a flood stage. He cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And when it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off these stones. So these stones, they're going to be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we make sometimes is we don't keep the evidence of God's miracles in front of us all of the time. So one of the things I've found is for me is, man, pictures do it for me. Like if God's opened a door for you to do something, take a picture and make it visible. Or for me, I have little souvenirs that I keep from different trips I've done where I'm like, man, that was an amazing trip. And you just keep it up there and you keep it. And the power of those is like, we don't want to obviously worship the item, right? That's idolatry. But what we're doing is we're reminding ourselves of the miracle that Jesus accomplished in our lives. And every one of you have miracles that he did. And you say, well, I don't have that. And I didn't remember to bring anything from that trip I took. Well, listen to me. You got miracles all over the place, all around you. Some of you right now are sitting next to a miracle. Right? That spouse, you didn't deserve that spouse. Right? But she married you anyway. And here you are today. And you're complaining about it, but you forget, man, remember when you wondered if you were going to be single the rest of your life? And so did your parents. You remember that? And now you're married. And some of you you're like, man, I don't know if we'll ever be able to have kids. I don't know if I can be a parent. And now your kids are like in their teens and they're eating all your food. And you're like, these kids are driving me crazy. Hey, that was a miracle at one point. You remember the stress for you women, man. I remember the stress Emily went through when we were going to have a daughter, the fear and the anxiety. Is my child going to be healthy? And now our kids are running around. They're like, oh, they're so annoying. And you're like, hey, those kids are miracles, man. You got a miracle running around to remind you of God's faithfulness. And you know what? He's going to get you through this season just like he got you through the last season, just like he got you through the season before. And you're going to come out on top because he's the one that's doing it. And you've got to remind yourself of that because we're so prone to forget. But then don't just remind yourself of it. It's really important to tell others of what God has done in your life. I love this verse in Revelation. It's one of my favorite. Revelation is the end of the book. Like it's how it all goes down. Like it's done after Revelation. And there's this one passage in Revelation at the end of the book where the enemy is defeated, Satan is conquered, the saints have gone to war against him, and it says the saints defeated the enemy this way. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. What this simply means is we win because Jesus paid the price for our lives. He's the one that's in control of our lives. He does the miracles. And the power that comes in to remind ourselves of it comes when we tell others the testimony of what he's done in our lives. I think about guys that go through Alcoholics Anonymous or recovery programs. One of the powerful things about that is they say, man, I was powerless over alcohol, but God delivered me. And I know you're struggling right now with alcohol, but God delivered me. And the same thing is true for marriages. Some of you today, you're sitting next to a miracle because, man, you should not still be married, and you know it. But yet you are because God brought you through the struggle, the challenge. And on the other side now, you can say to other people, listen, I know it's hard right now. I know it feels completely hopeless, but trust me, I've been in a hopeless situation. And we came out on the other side, and we made it. Maybe some of you are struggling with your health today, and you need to get around somebody that's made it through a similar struggle, and you need to say, man, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this illness. And they can tell you, hey, we made it. We made it. Some of you are grieving. You feel like you're losing hope because you're like, man, I just can't shake this grief. It's just weighing on me and just keeps coming back around and coming back around. And you know what you need to do? Maybe you need to get around somebody that's got a testimony of God's goodness. Because listen, God did it before. He doesn't change. He will do it again. And here's what I've found. The challenges get harder, but the glory gets bigger. So you may be in and say, yeah, but this is nothing like that last time. Well, yeah, but he made it through that last one. And your faith has grown through that, hadn't it? Your faith grew. God doesn't expect us to have this epic faith right from the beginning. He says, I'm going to show you little by little how you can get that faith. So he says, go through this challenge, and you walk through it, and you make it. And then you go through this challenge, you make it. But you got to remind yourself, we did make it. I'm still here. And here's the thing. God didn't bring you this far to ditch you. That'd be a total waste. He didn't bring you this far. He didn't get you through that. He didn't get you through that illness. He didn't get you through those financial struggles when you thought you'd never be able to make it again. He didn't provide all that for you. He didn't give you those kids just so you could come to the end and to this point and then be like, that's enough with you. No, he brought you this far because he's got greater, more glorious things for you. So whatever you're facing this morning, man, if you're looking around and you're going, I don't know if I'm going to ever get married. I don't know if this marriage is going to be able to hold together. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to be financially stable. I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to shake this depression or shake this sickness. And this is the one thing I can tell you this morning. Remember to remember. Don't let the memories of what God did for you in the past slip out of your mind from interference or from decay or from just failing to look at the details. And here's one thing I would encourage you to do this today. If you're feeling discouraged, feeling depressed, God hadn't come through for you like you thought he would, you say, man, I just can't shake it. I thought we'd be done with this. I thought we'd have the win by now, but we're here in the bottom of the ninth and we're still facing this. I remember the first Astros game I went to was in 1987, and we were a little behind at the game I went to. Nolan Ryan was pitching the game, if that tells you anything. I think it was Nolan Ryan. Yeah, it was Nolan Ryan. And we were a little behind, and my aunt, she took me to the game, and right about the 8th inning, she took her hat, and she flipped it inside out, and she put it on inside. I was like, what are you doing? She goes, this is my rally cap. I was like, what do you mean it's your rally cap? And she says, you see that banner up there? We won this deal in 86, and we can do it again. And I think that's what happens with us when we choose to remember God's goodness in our lives. We say, man, it's not looking good. We're going to flip the hat inside out, and we're going to keep our eyes fixed on the fact that he did it before. Man, he can totally do it again. And it's by his power that's going to happen anyways, if you'll just hang on in faith and trust. But here's what I would encourage you to do. Write it down. Man, sometimes we think we're going to remember, and we don't, right? But one of the best things that can happen is when you stumble across one of these books, and you look through and you go, oh, wow, man, I totally forgot that happened. I really should not be married. But good gosh, the Lord brought me through, right? And you just remind yourself. And here's the thing, guys, look, guys, it doesn't have to be like gut-wrenching, pouring your heart, like deep within my heart there's a yearning, right? No, I'm just talking about, dude, God did this. Like, it's a cool thing he did. And just write it down. That's literally all mine. I'm not going to let you read it. But that's all it is. Like, God did this. I can't believe that, right? You don't have to be all like pouring your hat on it, but you need to remind yourself constantly of that. And you need to keep visible reminders all around you. And you need to remind yourself of the miracles that are all around you that you've forgotten are miracles. And that is how you make it through the hard times. You remember, he's a God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. He's going to provide. He's going to give you everything you need according to his riches and glory. The peace you need, the joy. Man, he's got it for you. And you can walk in that. You can walk in confidence and courage. God's got you. Don't forget it. Just remember. And write it down. If you're feeling discouraged, man, go home. Go buy a 75-cent notebook from Walmart and just start writing the last time God bailed you out. And that'll help you remember another time God bailed you out. And before you know it, you'll probably fill a notebook with stories of God's miraculous intervention in your life. And then you can just say, God, you did it before. I'm trusting you're going to do it again. Amen. You receive that? Hey, let me pray for you guys. Lord, I thank you so much that, man, because of Jesus, we have total confidence. Man, he's the miracle worker. Whatever it is anyone's facing this morning, Lord, I just pray that you would instill us with hope. Lord, bring to our mind, remind us of those amazing things you did in the past when there was no way, you made a way, and we can walk in confidence because you're going to continue doing that. I thank you that you're going to remind us, Lord. I pray that you're going to give us just memories we forgot about of your goodness, Lord, for your glory that we can remember because it's all you who's doing it. And man, you didn't bring us this far to ditch us. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter and brighter. And we believe that great things are ahead. And we'll remember the past, but we know that even greater things are ahead. If you're here this morning, and I know in a crowd this big, there's somebody here that you do not have your life straight with Jesus. You know it. You say, man, I don't even know where to start. Listen, we're going to say a prayer in just a second. And if you say this prayer, it's not magic words or anything. It's not some magic formula. But if you say this prayer and you mean it in your heart, something amazing is going to happen. You're going to be transferred from the kingdom of fear and darkness and shame into the kingdom of light and confidence and joy and peace in Jesus. So we're going to say this prayer, and if we'd all say it together, and if you say this and mean it, something amazing is about to happen. Let's say this. Lord Jesus, we repent of our sins. We turn from our way, and we turn toward your way. Help us to walk in your light. In your name, amen. Hey, if you just said that prayer, something miraculous happened. You've got your first miracle you can write down. You got transferred from the kingdom of darkness. You got a whole new identity. You got, like everything just changed right now. Write it down. Write down today's date. Everything changed for you today. You got an eternal address set up in heaven. Start keeping track of those miracles because he's got even greater things ahead for you. Hey, you guys, I pray you have a great week. Let's all stand. You are dismissed. Be blessed.
Hey, thanks for joining us this morning. If you would like to give toward our ministry, to see more resources put out online, check out crossroadsc.com/giving. And don't forget, we have 3 services on Sunday morning at 8:30, 10 o'clock, and 11:30. Hope to see you there.